everybody. Uh, Thank you for joining UnleashCon and coming to listen to my talk. I'm here today to talk to you about building a business case for feature flags or how to convince the bosses. My name is DT Norris. I am a senior SRE Engineering Manager with Cisco Meraki, and let's get into this. So first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been in engineering management and developer experience for quite a while. I've been over a year here, most lately at Cisco, and well over 5 years before that with Wayfair. Prior to sort of my engineering management transition, I did spend my sort of technical foundations with a handful of consulting shops, most notably Pivotal Labs, kind of deeply steeped in pair programming, CI/CD, test-driven development, and building full stack software applications using, at the time, newer platform tooling. But most relevant to this talk, I also have been part of bringing in Unleash specifically into the two most recent public companies I've been part of, both Cisco and Wayfair. On the personal side, I have a deep love of game design. I would call myself a veteran of doing that for well over 30 years with a bit of a possibly unhealthy love of collecting Dungeons and Dragons books. And last but not least, I am a husband of a beautiful wife and father of two small children, ages 4 and 1. So lots of things to keep me busy. So diving into the talk here today, running through the agenda very briefly. Sadly, this will not be an index of subclasses and character features, but I'll recap some of the technical context that is important to think about when framing any pitch about feature toggles, how that technical context relates to developer experience stories that many companies are talking about, thinking about more broadly. And then we'll double down into, the developer experience generally and how that can be a force multiplier for your firm. Understanding that background, then we'll take that and talk about why you should think about all those things in the context of clarifying your business case for feature toggles. Think a little bit about who you might be making that case to, who you're pitching, how to frame that pitch, and round it all up with kind of summarizing why, as engineers, we have a really unique perspective to bring to the table. So, the technical context. You are all here at a feature flag conference, so some of these things you're going to know, but they are worth kind of bringing to the forefront of our minds. Feature flags are a tried and true battle-tested industry best practice. Other folks outside of engineering may not recognize the name, but Martin Fowler is a leading voice in developer productivity, developer experience, and as far back as 2010, almost the ancient past when it comes to software, he has published prominent blog articles on the feature flag pattern. Technically speaking, the concept is simple. Simple is reliable. Reliable is safe. Safe is generally good when we think of engineering best practices. The simplest engineered solution is less able to break. Skilled engineers in any company at this point are more and more expecting industry standard best-in-class tools. Best-in-class version control, CI/CD, feature flags kind of fit right along with that toolkit. And then, it's important to be aware of all of these things are true, and yet it's not enough, right? It's not enough for these truths just to exist for you to end up with the opportunity to work with feature flags day in, day out. Um, so talking about feature flags, you know, they also are just a component of the developer experience more broadly in any software engineering ecosystem. Um, uh, Similar to other components of that, you know, um, justifications or explanations of someone who might ask, well, why don't we just, include if conditions in our code base? Well, you could theoretically do that. You could also theoretically build your own version control system. But unless you are Google or similar, have similar depth of funds to invest, uh, you're going to be spending your company's very limited innovation tokens on innovating source control, which maybe there's a firm or two out there trying to do that, but for most of us, that's not going to be what our day-to-day goals are. So you don't want to build your feature flag system in-house any more than you'd build your own version control, your own CI/CD. Feature flags also relate to and improve all essential aspects of DORA metrics: change lead time, change frequency, mean time to restore, change failure rates, um, and uh, last but not least, they really are one of these tools that become a force multiplier for an internal developer experience platform. So let's talk about that force multiplication. So first of all, let's define what do we mean by force multiplier. Software is really kind of fascinating. One of the reasons why I am passionate about developer experience is, like finance in some ways, it has this weird property that the more you work on software, the more software you can get out of it. Um, the reality is, as most of us know, companies are filled with all kinds of tech debt, and realistically, um, uh, the level of tech debt is an important trade-off that we're all trying to balance at any given time. And certainly in the current environment, but generally, engineering departments are always wanting to do more with less. And miraculously, in many cases, we can actually pull that off. So, talking about force multiplying, it's helpful to kind of put this in very concrete numbers and math. Um, when you start talking about force multiplying in a platform context, um, I'm going to refer to an article that was published almost a decade back by Twitter as their engineering org grew and grew. You start to get to a point where it becomes actually strangely more efficient to have engineers allocated to not work on features for your customers. So in this example case, as you have 100 engineers, actually having 2 engineers working full time to speed up those other engineers mathematically, given certain assumptions, um, will produce the output of 101 engineers. Where this really gets interesting is as we expand the scope and you look at an organization of 1,000 engineers, now you mathematically would get the output of over 1,400 engineers by having 200, over a quarter of those 1,000 engineers actually not working on features for customers, which is really fascinating. If you're really curious about kind of understanding this at much more length, there's a fantastic article, I'm sure we'll link it in the talk description, etc., published 2015 by Peter Seibel, that kind of lays out the formula, his thinking behind why he created it, and the numbers involved that are making relatively conservative estimates. One engineer is going to speed up another engineer 2%. So you certainly do need a certain level of scale. Now, how this can apply to bringing in and why we've seen an explosion of developer experience tools in the last years is, as more and more companies are producing software as a core function, we can support, the industry can support more tools that, I even with a small shop of, let's say, a dozen engineers, it is makes sense to bring in products that are built by other engineers because they're supporting tens of thousands, but even internally within the scope of a single company. So when you're thinking about force multiplying, think about, pitching okay, 1,000, 100 engineers, what have you, we can get to the equivalent output of, uh, 12 engineers, 120 engineers, 1,400 engineers without actually needing to hire more, without needing to spend more. So that's do more with less. Um, so all of that takes you around to, okay, uh, we understand the things that in our world make sense. Again, why is it really important for you to think about selling something internally? You're an engineer. You like to work with machines. Machines do what people tell them to do, even if we don't remember what that is. And if you wanted to sell things, you'd be in sales, right? People don't do what you tell them to do, or ask, or who knows, or beg. Um, the truth of the matter is, I am here to share that if we as engineers don't kind of equip ourselves and think about selling the need we have for tools, we're going to end up without tools functionally. The people that we need to pitch internally, the internal stakeholders, will not get it. The truths that I just shared with you, they definitely won't know. They won't even necessarily know what they don't know or where to look, right? As engineers, we have the perspective of someone that writes code that works with, okay, what is involved in getting these black box machine things to function differently? And, understanding what's involved, we can really speak to, okay, how can additional tools, feature toggles, etc., impact that work day in, day out? So continuing to understand, now understanding why it's important to make a case, the next step is kind of understanding who are you going to make that case to. Um, Hopefully, it's a slightly less imposing figure than our dreadful overlord masters here pictured on the slide. But it's going to be some layer of leadership, whether or not it be a few layers of engineering leadership above you, whether or not it be executive leadership, or if you're a small enough place, possibly even investors, right? It's going to be folks that do not, day in, day out, understand the impact. And so understand that these folks' day-to-day work is filled with abstractions and ambiguity. So imagine for your own work, you need to develop a piece of software, but you don't know what operating systems it's going to get deployed in. You don't know how it's going to run. You don't know the machine specs. Honestly, being an SRE sounds like a nightmare. And that's just kind of what we wake up for breakfast to in the morning um, in the leadership space. So very often leaders are absorbing all kinds of information about new domains and spaces they don't understand, they can't possibly have worked in, and needing to make what sounds like a least bad option. Um, None of us know what the future is going to hold, and very often we have to make choices that are going to impact how we go forwards into that unknowable future. So this is going to sound boring, but listen to your all hands. Shut down Slack. Actually, really try to focus on the content. Read the company updates. Block out time to kind of load that context into your brain and understand the problems. Either communicated through your manager, maybe a skip level manager, um, or even quarterly earnings calls. Listen to the problems that your company is facing, your investors might be asking about, and understand what they're trying to solve. What's the most pressing on their minds, right? How can so that relates to how can you frame the case for feature flags internally to move the needle on that top problem, right? Is it a case for stability? Is it a case for speed to customer? Is it a case, sometimes improving DevX itself can be a company priority, or is it even a cost savings measure, right? Any of these different uh, headline business impact problem spaces are things that feature toggling can impact. Um, Once you kind of understand the case that you're needing to solve for, and we'll go into an example here in just another minute, do the math. It, again, will seem probably intuitively obvious to you how this will allow you to be twice as fast, et cetera, et cetera. You can just get more of your product backlogs done, but do the math in numbers in a spreadsheet, breakout, whatever, for modeling that case. And you don't need to. We're engineers; we like to be precise, but when you're operating in the realm of making a case where everything's fuzzy and everything is abstractions, your assumptions don't need to be perfect. You can talk to other frontline folks, talk to your PM, et cetera, to kind of understand, like, okay, are my assumptions close to the mark? So let's walk through an example. This example, we're kind of framing, bringing in feature flags into your product domain space, net new. Some very baseline assumptions that I'm making here is that, let's say, our service A being down for an hour costs the firm $10,000. Code deploys take us 4 hours in a best case scenario. Estimating a code deploy therefore costs us 40,000. We average around 2 bad code deploys per month, so 24 per year, costing us a little under $1 million per year, just through sort of bad code deploys and the time it takes us to recover. New feature flags for these bad code deploys, we estimate could reverse these changes in 5 minutes time, 2% the time. So you kind of lay out the math. Assuming we reverse all of these changes, bad code deploys over the next year in 5 minutes rather than 4 hours, that saves us 98% of that 960,000. Cost to build out and pay for a feature flag tool, including some rough estimates for salary costs for an engineer for about a quarter, say that's 300,000. Now you've worked out a number to say the net value of this project that you're pitching is 640,000 to the business. Oh, and by the way, that's value the business will not lose that it's already earning, right? Now you can take that and say, yeah, you can consider this versus maybe a pitch for a project that might bring in new revenues of maybe even $1 million, right? But it's more it then allows your leadership to consider those two things, weighing the pros and cons, right? The maybe higher new revenue versus more of a stronger guarantee of a definite, 640,000 in savings and maybe other intangibles, customer relations, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of summing all of that up, use your unique perspective. What is obvious to you as an engineer is not going to be obvious to others. Using a bit of an exception example myself, even giving this talk, I questioned, like, are people really going to be interested in this? It seems so obvious, etc. Well, I'm talking to people about and thinking about these kinds of problems day in, day out. So yeah, your knowledge as an engineer is context that it's all too easy to forget other folks don't have. Ask questions, and some more questions, right? The best thing you can do to equip yourself to make this pitch is really to listen to the problems that are out there. And then sort of summing all that up, make it specific, make it concrete, and most of all, make your case with numbers. Thank you very much for your time. Again, I've been DT Norris, and good luck with your internal cases for feature toggles. Have a great day.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you, DT. So hopefully you can join me right now. There you go. So for everybody's information, of course, this is a pre-recording. We do this for logistics. So DT has different clothes now. He didn't magically transform into the black. It's just that for simplicity, we wanted to pre-record just to make sure everything went smooth. So this was a fantastic presentation, DT. Thank you so much. I actually have a personal question before we take it some from the audience. So at Unleash, we say that you're not a real member of the engineering team before you break something in production. So do you have any war stories for us?
Man. Yeah. Yeah. I'll actually I'll go back to my Wayfair days to grab one of my favorite. So this was a situation where um, one of the trickiest things about developer tools is that you get into like developing developer tools, especially at big companies, you get into a bit of inception challenges where like, if you break the tool that everyone uses to fix the site, then how do you
Oh,
fix the tool that's now broken? So um,
exactly.
the situation that we ended up in, I was in a meeting with my staff engineer at the time, and someone actually like came into the meeting in the middle and was like, "I need both of you with me right now. Follow me." And they pulled us into, we had sort of a war room, and where actually like our VP of infrastructure, like everyone was in. It was like, what is going on? Turns out the whole website was down for Wayfair, which is costing us money by the second. And what had happened is, for whatever unfortunate historical reasons, basically a bad deploy had, broken CSS, front end assets, and that had broken the deploy tool itself. So, everyone was sort of wringing their hands trying to figure out like, how do we, get the deploy to itself. Um, what I was very lucky to experience at the time is my staff engineer kind of quietly sat down, pulled up his laptop. Everybody is talking like, "Oh, do we try this? Do we try that?" He just kind of starts working the problem, and then he managed to pull up. We had a everyone had forgotten about it. Sort of far more like no front end assets, simpler backup deploy tool that had been built multiple years ago, fortunately, by some foresighted engineer. Um, and he managed to kind of redeploy the main deploy tool, and then we were able to kind of start recovering things in a snowball after that. But all of that is to say, yeah, be real careful when you're where your dependencies lie when you're talking about the tools you depend on to keep things working at all. Um,
Yeah, particularly those circular dependencies, those are really bad. Thank you for sharing. So one question from the audience. So you mentioned a lot about what to do and how to build your business case for feature flags, but what are things to avoid?
Things to avoid. I think might sound like repeating the same thing, but if your company is really budget constrained, um, don't talk about how, your tooling is going to make it that much more effective after you hire another 10 engineers. Um, there are ways you can frame that, like, will almost make a case against you if you do it wrong. So, kind of avoid talking about things that people are not interested in hearing. Um, and sometimes that means like know when to shut up and avoid continuing to talk. Like again, as engineers, we love the details, we love the specifics, we love going down rabbit trails, and sometimes the best way you can sell is to kind of make your very clear, quick, concise statement and then shut up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You also briefly mentioned like productivity metrics like the DORA metrics, deploy frequency, and all of that. What do you think is, in your opinion, for feature flags? Which of those kind of DORA metrics that we care about is most impacted by adopting techniques like feature flags?
Um, Probably mean time to restore is an easy
Yeah.
one. even with a very efficient deployment process, it still takes time to put packages onto a machine to reboot application processes, etc. And flipping a feature toggle can usually be minutes, if not seconds.
Hmm. The challenge, though, is that you have to detect that you have a problem. So I guess you also need to have your observability in place. And
Yes.
usually that takes more time to understand where the problem is than actually flipping the flag, at least in my experience.
Potentially, potentially. I mean, it also depends on the kind of business, right? Like, certainly in Wayfair's case, we can watch revenue numbers by the second. And so, like,
Yeah.
every deploy, we would be watching the orders. And if, a deploy goes out and suddenly orders drop, like, there's a very clear signal. So similarly, like, if you're flipping a feature toggle, if you're watching those metrics when you do it, right? Um, but yeah, observability, I mean, you need that for so much more even than DevX, right?
Yeah. So I guess we are reaching the end here. I want people to or allow people to have a few minutes break before the next presentation. So again, thank you so much for joining in, and yeah, see you around.
Yeah, thank you for putting this on.